A great many years ago, there lived a
Poor old miller.
He had long since given up on making a fortune turning grain to flour, especially with all the talk around town of
gluten intolerance
and
The evil of carbohydrates.
so increasingly saw his beautiful daughter as his.
Best bet for retirement plan.
One day, along with other tradespeople, he happened upon the chance for an audience with the king. Each of the tradespeople were boasting about their talents,
My idea.
and seeing the opportunity to tout his importance, the miller said.
Well, I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold.
The room immediately fell silent, and the bemused king looked at the miller.
That is an art much to my liking.
He said.
Bring her to my palace tomorrow and I will put her to the test.
Of course, the poor girl, beautiful as she was, had no idea how to spin straw into gold. So, when the next day came, she could do little but tremble and weep as she was locked in a room in the palace with only some straw, a spinning wheel, and a promise that she should turn the straw to gold by morning or
Die!
The night wore on, and the girl simply sobbed in the corner, pleading into the empty space for a solution to her troubles. Then all of a sudden, a little man appeared in the doorway.
Good evening, miss.
He inquired.
Why you be quiet?
The astonished girl wiped her tears.
Oh dear.
She sniffed quietly.
The king will take my life. Do not turn this straw into gold thread.
Said the little man.
And I haven't got the first idea how to do it.
The girl continued. The little man simply furrowed his eyebrows and said.
What would you give me if I spin it for you?
The girl was taken aback, but replied.
My family is poor, but I have this necklace.
The little man immediately took the necklace and sat at the spinning wheel, his quick movements turning the straw into stunning gold thread, while the girl looked on in amazement. Before the sun rose, the little man disappeared into the shadows and was gone. So when the king arrived the next morning, he naturally credited the girl with this miracle of golden thread being spun from ordinary straw. But he was
Not content with just one batch of this amazing gold thread.
and promised the girl again that she would
Die!
if she could not repeat the trick the following night. So she found herself once again locked in a room with just straw and a spinning wheel. Fortunately, her tears summoned the little man for the second time, who, as before, asked what she had to give.
This ring is all I have left.
The girl replied, then, as before, watched while the little man took her ring, then turned the straw to gold. The king was delighted the girl had pulled the same trick twice and thought to himself,
She may be a miller's daughter, but with skills just like this, I shan't find a richer girl in the whole entire world.
and immediately locked her back in the room with yet more straw and a spinning wheel.
You've already impressed me. But if you can turn all of this straw into gold, you will get my son's hand in marriage. Otherwise, you'll die.
The shocked girl sat quietly in this prison and had no choice but to use her tears to again call the little man.
I have nothing left to give.
She cried when he appeared.
But I must spin the straw into gold.
The little man didn't even blink.
Then promise me when you are queen your firstborn child.
The desperate girl was stunned, but had little choice but to nod, and the little man set immediately to work, finishing just in time to disappear into the shadows when the king arrived the next morning. The king was indeed impressed and immediately fetched his son for a grand royal wedding. Only we won't be covering that here because of production budget restraints. Years passed and the new queen completely forgot the little man, but merely days after she had brought her first beautiful child into the world, he reappeared in her chamber, commanding her to
Give me what you promised.
The stricken queen tried to renege and instead promised him,
Golds, jewels, anything but my child.
but the little man insisted.
I'd rather have a living creature than all the jewels in the world.
Queen cried and
Delicious.
The queen cried and wailed in such terror and sorrow that the little man eventually took pity on her.
3 days you have to learn my name if you want to keep your child.
The queen sent messengers to compile a list of all the names throughout the kingdom, then rattled them off when the little man arrived the
Ben,
next day.
Philip, David, Paul, Mike, Sam.
But the little man shook his head with each,
Stephen,
declaring,
I am called none of those names.
The next day, the queen listed all the strangest names she or any of her wise council could think of.
Jeff, Manny Mick, Manface, avocado, Rapunzel.
but to no avail. So on the morning of the third day, as the queen sat despondent in her chambers, a messenger from the far end of the kingdom returned.
I have one new name.
He said,
As I searched the kingdom, I came across a small house deep in a mountain forest, with a little man dancing around it.
the queen leaned forward.
I hid out of sight and watched as he danced and sang.
Today I'll bake, tomorrow I'll brew, the next I'll fetch the queen's child new. Still no one knows, it's just a saying, that Rumpelstilskin is my name.
The queen was delighted, and when the little man arrived and inquired,
So, Queenie, what's my name?
she answered,
Is it Tom? No. Is it Dick? No. Then perhaps it's Rumpelstilskin.
The little man went very quiet, then very loud.
The devil told you!
He shrieked and stamped his foot so hard on the ground in his anger that he buried his leg deep into the floor. Even as he raged on, he couldn't release himself from the trap he'd made, not even by tearing himself in two. So the royal family and the various palace staff and courtiers simply ignored him and left him there. Occasionally they'd feed him or bring him a chamber pot, and after several years he calmed down enough so that they could start promoting him as a local tourist attraction.
Step right out. Come and see the little man stuck in the floor.
And putting him to use whenever gold thread was required.